Good morning. Today I'd like to show you another one of my add-ons I've been having fun with, developing the last several days. So I am a character artist by aspiration. Anyway, I use Marvelous Designer a lot, and if you've used Marvelous Designer before, you know that it can weld its patterns very well in the high poly version when it exports, but the low poly version definitely leaves something to be desired in that aspect. So what I have here is just a simple pair of pants that have been exported, and I'm going to show you what my add-on does. So the add-on is called Stitcher, and it simply stitches mesh panels together. And it does it in a very Marvelous Designer inspired way. So I've used different versions of the tool on this, and you can see some shading errors and stuff that it used to have. This side has been stitched together with the current workflow, and as you can see, no new shading errors have been introduced there. It's just as exported from Marvelous Designer, except that everything is watertight. It's all stitched together. So first let me show you a part that has the problem. This has all been stitched together, so you can see it's watertight. When I select it with L, it selects it all. So this seems to introduce some shading errors just moving it around. And this has all been stitched together with the shading errors. So let's go ahead and look at a section that has not been stitched yet. Whoops. Yeah, that's right. Everything's hidden inside there. So I'm going to isolate this first, and I'm going to just zoom in. So if I use L to select everything that's linked, you can see it only selects a small portion because all of these pieces of the pattern are not sewn together. So first of all, let's separate out the jacket. That's a good portion of the jacket, but we also want the sleeves, likely. I'm not going to do the entire jacket on this just for time's sake, but I will give you a taste of what we're looking at here. So zoom into the jacket, and again we know that these are not stitched together, but we want to stitch them together. There's no built-in way in Blender to do that easily, except for merge by distance, and it really isn't easy, and it actually is quite destructive. It eliminates a lot of the geometry, and it definitely destroys the UV layout, which is one of the hugest perks, in my opinion, of working with Marvelous Designer. Excuse me, I've got poly build on. That's gonna make things a bit awkward. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and hide the arms out because we're just gonna look at stitching some of these panels. So first what I want to do is just isolate this one so I can show you a basic stitch. Go ahead and set it to vertex mode. You can do this in whichever way you prefer selecting these, but again, it's inspired by Marvelous Designer, and so what we want to do is we want to select all of the edges that are in essentially the area that we would think of as a seam in Marvelous Designer, and in this add-on it will be called a seam. So I like to mark my edges. You can mark them as sharp, edge crease, seam, or freestyle edge mark. I like to use freestyle edge mark because I don't really mess with rendering with freestyle edges very much. But I've gone ahead and included them all so that it can, hopefully it'll work nicely with whichever workflow you use. Okay, so enough talking. Once you have them selected, you set the seam. It goes ahead and marks it and saves it as a vertex group. And you can go ahead and see that it's marked nicely so that later you'll know which seams you've already marked. So when I unhide everything, we're just going to select. Go ahead and select this single panel, isolate it, go in and get the matching seam that should be sewn here. I believe it goes like that. And one thing you can do is you can set it on edge selection mode just so that it kind of takes away some of the clutter and you can see that you've selected exactly what you meant to select before you set the seam. So I'm going to set this seam. I'm going to go ahead and unhide everything. And actually I will hide the sleeve just so that you can see. So both seams are marked. You can see that the freestyle edge marking is shown on them both. Not very well because they're overlapping, but all you do at this point is you stitch seams, and you see this appears and the unwrap faces appears as well once you have 2 or more seams. So you can sew 3 seams, 4 seams, any number of seams, something like up to 26 seams together at once. I don't recommend it. It probably gets pretty awkward, but in some cases you might find this useful. So anyway, we'll just take these 2 seams, do a simple stitch just to show you what it does. Okay, so it doesn't look like it changed, did it? Does it? So, but you go in and you can see that now it is watertight. The seam is actually sewn. It also clears out the vertex groups, the seam vertex groups, so that you don't have to worry about those getting cluttered up in the seam. And if you hit L, it'll select everything that's sewn together. Okay. Now we go ahead and sew the other side as well because it's not selected and it's not tight. And you can also see that there's this seam up here that needs to be sewn. So we'll go ahead and select that as well. You can still select just what you want to select if you change it to UVs. And I'll show you why in a second. When you export from Marvelous Designer, again, you can see the new sewn geometry there. When you export from Marvelous Designer, it does a beautiful job laying out the UVs. Just go ahead and look at our UV editor. And what is going on? Okay, it's not synced with the other layout, of course. So we will go ahead and get, I'm not sure which thing it is that we're editing here. It doesn't matter for the minute, but I can just open up Zin UV so you can see the UVs. So our UVs are over here, and when you go to unwrap, to stitch, which I'll show you just now, another set of seams, since we need to do them anyway. So there's one seam edge, set that. Go ahead and unhide everything. Yeah, as you can see, it's all unwrapped nicely. We'll select this as well. The reason it works just selecting by UVs is because the UVs are unwrapped so nicely. They're all separate. And that is what, well, okay, continue this. Just hide this as well. Isolate this as well. Select that. That's the next seam we need. Set that seam. Now that there are 2 seams, you can see this option. So this is what the unwrapping faces option here will do for you. So if you don't have this checked, I'll just go ahead and show you what happens. We'll stitch the seams. The reason I've added that is you can't see the reason I've added it here. Perhaps I've set that as default. But the reason I've added that is that if you don't check that, you don't unwrap the seams will actually be connected to the pieces that you've just sewn, and they'll start overlapping and causing all sorts of havoc here in the UV islands, the UV layout. So when you do unwrap seams, all the seams end up here. They've just been freshly unwrapped, and so it's very easy to then go and organize them. Or if you know, if you're like me and you're lazy about organizing these, you can easily just select this and you can pack the UVs. And that will easily, you know, put them in an efficient spot for you. In my workflow, it doesn't really matter where this is all at because it will change at some stage. Just for now, it's important to me that they stay separate for organization and selection purposes. So that's why I've designed this as I have. But you might want yours to stay all in line. Your panels might even be right next to each other, and so you won't want to unwrap the seams. You'll just want it to place the seams connecting each other in the layout. So that's why I've put that option, and you can use it as you see fit. Okay, so this whole side is now sewn together. It's also watertight. Even though I just selected by UVs, you can see it's all watertight. Oh, oops. Kind of strange. Extra edge selected there. Yeah, you can see it's watertight, and all the seams are clearly connected now. Okay, and so let's go ahead, just give you a taste of getting this done. We'll go ahead and select that. We'll select our seam. Looks like most of it, but often you need to zoom in just to make sure. Yeah, looks like it is. So set that seam. Alt H to unhide everything. We'll select just this panel, isolate it with Shift H, and again we will get to the matching seam or the corresponding seam if you prefer. So zoom in. I'm gonna say that it goes all the way up. I don't know for sure, but we will know once we stitch, I suppose. I'm using the control click to try and find the shortest path, but it's not working out well, so I'm just gonna shift, just gonna shift click and try to select all of those. Okay, so just gonna jump to this view, period to focus on it. Okay, it looks correct. That looks like the full seam, so we'll set that seam as well. Okay, so I believe that entire seam is selected. We'll go ahead and stitch it. And then as you can see, we will turn it to normal. I've had a bit of an issue here. This can happen sometimes, and as you can see, it might not be what you're after. Looks like not the entire seam here is selected on the first part. So when that happens, something that you can do, yeah, you can see it doesn't extend the full way. We'll just hide that. Vertex groups for my seams are gone. It's all right. So we'll go ahead and select that. And I'm just using control click to manually find the shortest path. The shortest path is not always directly on the seam you want. And especially if the seam terminates with a pole or a vertex that branches off in multiple directions, that will prevent it from selecting as you normally would probably like it to. Okay, and we'll just go ahead and select the corresponding seam again. Here you can, if it does end up like this because you've used undo, you can select by the freestyle edge marking. So select by trait. And I know there's a way to do that. Select. Probably the best way to do it is just select an edge that has that marking, and then say select similar. Select similar by freestyle. There we go. So you select that way, and then we can set the second seam more easily. Usually what I do is I go ahead and unhide everything just to make sure it's looking proper. And then I stitch. Now, doesn't look like anything happened, which is good. It's intended to do that. So let's check that it's watertight. It is. Okay, awesome, excellent. We can go ahead and look at the, I'm going to go back to the UV editing mode. No, not the UV editing mode. We will go, yeah, my UV panel's here already. Thank you, Blender. Okay, select all. Perfect. And everything is still intact as it should be. And here are your seams, our seams. There's quite a few of them by this point. There are still a few caveats. One is that if you were to stitch the sleeves, you couldn't stitch the entire loop at once. I'm still working on that. So what you would need to do is select half of the loop and stitch it, and then the other half and stitch it. But it's in the very next plans to fix that, because I like this tool to make this a lot easier for you and for me as well. So anyway, that's what we've got. I'll be putting this tool up on Blender Market in a short time. It will be on, it'll also be on Gumroad as soon as possible. And I hope you find some use out of it. There will also be a free version for a trial and also personal use. So keep an eye out for that. Thanks for watching.